Welcome to Your College Bound Kid,
a podcast for parents, college counselors, students, and anyone who wants a weekly deep dive into the world of college admissions.
My name is Dave. I'm a parent of a daughter in college, and we live in Chicago, Illinois.
I'm Lisa, and I'm a clinical psychologist and college counselor. I have a daughter in college, a daughter in high school, and a son in middle school. After 30 years in Chicago, we recently moved to North Carolina.
My name is Mark. I'm a college coach in Atlanta and the parent of two daughters. Karis, a graduate of Davidson College, and she is the founder of the Spanish tutoring company, SpanishHelpToday.com. And Joy is a graduate of the University of Georgia, and she is getting her master's degree at North Carolina State University. Happy New Year's, Happy New Year's, Happy New Year. And I'm literally recording this on New Year's Day. And I come to you in the clouds with enthusiasm. First of all, my brother Norm and his son Xander came in from Denver. We had 4 days of so much fun. And for those who think I never watch TV, well, we were glued to the TV for two incredible football games yesterday. Shout out to both TCU and Georgia for winning two thrillers. And we are kicking off 2023. So I want to just start by thanking everyone in our entire listening family out there for all you did in 2022. There's so many things you did in 2022 that really inspired all of our co-hosts. And I want to personally take the time to thank all of you for all the things you've done to fuel our passion and keep us coming back to deliver 10 hours of new content every month in 8 to 10 episodes every month. So I'm just going to individually list the things that you actually do that are the wind beneath our wings. First is all the emails that you send to us and direct messages on Twitter about how our podcast or an episode on the podcast or a segment on the podcast helped you. I share all of these with our co-hosts unless somebody explicitly asks for them not to be shared. And we all draw such inspiration from all of your comments and just knowing that we're making a difference. Educators go into education and make a difference. And so when you tell an educator that what you did helped me, you inspire us. Also, reviews. 173 of you have gone on and given us ratings on Apple Podcasts, and we are most grateful for that. And with your help, we'll get over the 200 mark. And we're grateful that most have been 5 stars because a 4-star rating is actually a terrible podcast rating. Yes, there's podcast grade inflation out there as well. But the comments that you put in there help others to pick podcasts for them to listen to. Another thing is the articles that you've sent in. So many times we pick articles because multiple people send them in and we realize, okay, there's an interest out there in this. Let's discuss it. And then there's the questions that you send in that form the basis of our, weekly Thursday agenda every week, questions from a listener. And then we have the donations that you provide for us. We have 30 people who give monthly, and you allow us to budget so we can plan, knowing sort of what our expenses are and that we have some resources coming in. And then there's the individuals who give. And I'll be really transparent with you guys. Before this year, the largest gift we had received was $350, and we had 2 people send $1,000 gifts in 2022 with really inspiring notes about how the podcast had impacted their family or their friends. And that allowed us to make some significant upgrades. But it's everybody. It's the 30 regulars monthly that give us a budget. It was the large gift. It's the small gifts because they all add up. Those gifts from $20, up to $350. Not that $350 is small, but those gifts that all come in that range. They just allow us to continue to pay our staff, continue to expand into new areas. And you should know none of our co-hosts have ever taken a single penny, nor will we ever take a penny. We'll just invest everything that comes in to making the podcast hopefully better every year. It's those of you who subscribe to YCBK Plus. You think 10 hours of us a week is enough, but for those of you who want more, that inspires us. And those of you who go on our blog and our website, and Linda shares the analytics with us sometimes, and we can really see where you're going. We've learned that our resource page is, for example, one of the most popular places on our website. All that inspires us. It's the questions you send in for us to ask our interviewees. That inspires us. It's the times you write in and say that you share the podcast with everyone. We'd love to hear that, or that you share the podcast in Facebook groups. And there's also those of you that we've had a chance to meet in person or on Zoom, or who for working with you. It's just really inspired us tremendously. And we just can't thank you enough. I want to dedicate 2022 to you and 2023 to you. So 2022 was also a huge year for us in some other ways. In June, we went to twice a week, which we never envisioned, but we just had so many interviews we wanted you to hear. And something else which I'll share in a second why we did that. We also expanded our staff. Shout out to Susan, Vince, and Julia, who all joined as co-hosts in the early to mid part of the year, and Linda, who came on toward the mid and the later part of the year. And she does so many things for us, whether it's join me for College Spotlights or Come on Monday episodes, or she's even got an interview coming up with Lisa. So a lot of big things happened in 2022. Now, some other things that happened, more metrics became available for tracking podcasts. And for the majority of the weeks, we were in the number one position in Apple has something called Chartable, and they have a category called Education for Kids. And in the college admissions section of that, sometimes we were number 2 for the week, but most of the time we were number 1. And so that's all as a result of you. And we're most grateful. So what's happening in 2023? Well, we want to make some substantial upgrades to our website. That's huge. And we really have some big plans. And so you'll be hearing more about that. Plan on doing a lot more of the traditional type of college spotlights, but not forsaking the interviews with key thought leaders. More of a both and approach like we did a lot in 2021 and 2020. So many of you said you like sort of the editorializing feedback, that I provide when I do these. And so just based on your feedback, I'm just going to make it a priority within my calendar to do more and more of them. And then this is really huge, and this is the thing that I said I'd comment on. But before I do, I'll share this. Somebody recently asked me a question. They said, "Why did you start the podcast?" And, when Anika and I founded the podcast, our whole idea was we want to bridge the knowledge gap between people who have tremendous amount of knowledge and those who don't. And quite honestly, it's really for anybody who wants more knowledge. Those who have tremendous amounts of knowledge, God bless them. If they want to take their knowledge level from a 98 to a 99, we welcome every one of you. And so with that in mind, one of the big things I hope we can get to toward the end of 2023, maybe even earlier, is to start to do outreach to public schools. Independent schools as well, but public schools will be a real priority. And to get our website on their resource page. And every now and then, somebody asks me, what can I do to help? We had somebody from the Midwest this week said, listen, I'd love to volunteer with you guys. Is there anything I could do to help? And I said, let me think about it and I'll get back to you. Well, I've thought about it, and this pertains to anybody else. We would love to have some people take on as a project the idea of reaching out to schools that and ask them if they will put our website, yourcollegeboundkid.com, on their resource page. We think there's a lot of great information there, from the 130 plus interviews to the, I think about the similar number of spotlights, maybe more. The obviously the transcripts, all the episodes, over 400 hours of content now, and all of the recommended books and websites and things. And this could be one way that we could really help reach people that don't have access to that many resources. And I got this idea partly from Daryl, who I interviewed from University of Delaware. He also runs a CBO, community-based organization, and he says, I use your website all the time with all the students that I work with. It's a great treasure trove. And so we don't want that to be a secret. We want to get that out. So that if you want to know another way you can help us, is reach out to the people in your network, school network, and see if they would be willing to put our website on their counselor resource page. And if they don't have a counselor resource page, wherever they have information for parents. 2022 also marked us officially rolling out our mission statement, making college knowledge available for all. You're going to be hearing that a lot. We're very excited about that. We think that just succinctly summarizes exactly what we're trying to do, making college knowledge available for all. And some other good news came in 2022. 27 schools in the New York City area are going to be using our materials on our website as part of their college counseling curriculum. So those are all really great things that happened in 2022. Now, what am I going to share with you this week? Well, I'm going to share with you this week some feedback from the American Council of Education. A team of their leaders gathered together to discuss what are the hot issues, what are the big issues in higher ed in the year 2022. It's kind of like a counselor recap, if you want to put it. And I want to share what the American Council of Education, their panel felt were the biggest issues 2022. And they announced them December 19th, 2022, so pretty recently. And next week, I'm going to also share some feedback from another source. It's not everybody agrees on what the big issues were, but it's a good summary of what happened in higher ed. So according to the American Council of Higher Education, probably the most significant public policy was Biden's failure to get Build Back Better legislation passed when Manchin just could not sign off on it. The reason for that, according to the American Council of Education, is that it would have provided so much funding for free community college, which would have been a game changer in many states. And there were also a lot of incentives for states to perform equity audits of their higher education funding. And lastly, there was the $900 increase in Pell that was built into that package. So that was pretty significant, even that it didn't get through. Another major significant initiative in 2022 was student loan forgiveness being presented by Biden as well. A plan to save up to $20,000 for students who are Pell Grant recipients and $10,000 of federal student loan debt. And as of August, 26 million applications had been forgiven. However, it is now in the Supreme Court, and I think it's actually unlikely to be ruled as legal. But the good news is that there's another plan that Biden is working on, and I'll be talking a lot more about this in future weeks, and that is the new income-driven repayment plans. So look for very generous new income-driven repayment plans to come out that many people think that Biden administration sees the writing on the wall of the Supreme Court, and they're already working at getting something completely ready to go. So when the Supreme Court says that student loan forgiveness is unconstitutional, all indications are their new revisions in income-driven repayment plans will be constitutional. What are income-driven repayment plans? It ties the amount you have to pay to your income so that paying back student loans is not too onerous. And it has an element of loan forgiveness built in after you make payments for a certain amount of time. That's enough for now. I don't want to get too much in the weeds, but something you can expect me to talk about a lot more about in the future. There's another thing that happened that was really significant in this last year. It's related to loan forgiveness, but it's a little different. So people that had existing loan forgiveness architecture in place, $40 billion of relief was sent out to 1.8 million borrowers. And this occurred through the public service loan forgiveness, through temporary waivers, permanent disability relief, and borrower defense claims. So there are a lot of people that were trying to get public service loan forgiveness and are running into all kinds of red tape. The bottom line, if you want the simple version, the Biden administration got rid of the red tape, and it freed up a lot of people to get public service loan forgiveness who had been counting on it. You know, there's a program that's been in place for a while, PSLF, Public Service Loan Forgiveness, where students that work for nonprofits can have for 10 years, you know, like schools and other nonprofits can have their, student loans forgiven. Of course, they needn't be making payments during that time. And that was causing all kinds of consternation. But great progress was made on that this year. Another thing that the panelists of experts shared, advocates really see a possibility for a deal when it comes to DACA. And people may not realize this, but DACA recipients make up 2% of all higher ed students. It's a pretty big number. And so, although some were afraid that the 2023 National Defense Authorization Act, NDAA, was going to be overly restrictive when it came to the security provisions, which basically, to break it down, means a lot of DACA students could be sent back or deported. This actually didn't happen. So that was some encouraging information that happened in the year. And certainly right at the very end, that $1.7 trillion deal that got signed, that included a $500 increase for Pell Grants, the largest increase in Pell Grants since the program has been around. So, and when you consider there was a $400 increase the year before, that $900, I know it doesn't sound like that much, but it's much better than what had been happening, which were like $100 increases. And remember, the program is not even close to keeping up with the cost of college. So, that was an encouraging thing, that happened as well in the year. Now, briefly, what can we expect moving forward? Well, one thing to be aware of is there's a very important committee called the Educational and Workforce Committee. And the Republicans taking over the House, Virginia Foxx from North Carolina will be the chairing this committee along with Tim Walberg of Michigan. But Foxx is going to be the lead. And Foxx has made it clear she's likely to pursue investigations into the Biden administration's loan forgiveness program and into issues of free speech on campus. So that's just something you kind of want to be watching if you're looking for, for things to keep an eye on in the future. And then, of course, how could we not bring up the Supreme Court cases that we know are coming forward, both loan forgiveness and affirmative action? Very significant. There's also a Department of Education case related to Title IX sexual assault cases that we should expect to be hearing some information on. The House is also forming a select committee on China that might investigate foreign funding in higher education and research security provisions. And we're already seeing what's happening right now with colleges banning TikTok. So those are some of the hot issues that are clearly evident and on the agenda for 2023. So I thought, just with this being a New Year's issue, I'd do some recap of some of the main issues, talk about some of the main things you can expect for 2023. And I plan on doing something similar next week, but share some additional subjects that I never got to today.
And now this week's interview with a special guest.
Okay, friends, we've really gotten great feedback on Gus Resendiz and the interview on athletic recruiting, avoiding the potholes and the pitfalls of athletic recruiting. Quite a few have reached out to us, which we appreciate. The only way we really kind of know if an interview resonates with you is if we hear back from you. And today will be the third and final part. Listen and enjoy. And another thing, don't get impressed with these letters, these form letters that you get early. I remember Joy in 6th grade got a letter from Virginia Tech. She had a really good tournament, Kentucky. And, you're like, Virginia Tech, blah, 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 and it's like, you know what? It was literally just a form letter. Who knows how many of them they sent out. Right. It really didn't mean much, and you gotta learn how to check your ego, especially for that more prestigious school. And that could either be high-end athletically or it could be high-end academically. Either way, you could get seduced into, look at such and such school. They seem like they want me. And what you realize is that they, 500 kids got that same response.
And the invitations to the camps.
Yes, those can be money makers. You want to talk about that?
Oh, my goodness. So you get invited to every camp for every school under the sun.
Yeah.
Once you're in the database, you're getting invited to every camp. And, we would see some invites from some camps and I would look and say, we're not going to that, right? Especially for kids 2 and 3 here. Like Danny's getting them now. Sure. And what we did for Danny, he's going into his junior year, over this past summer. And I said, I want you to do 2 camps. And I want you to do 2 Ivy League camps, not because I think you're an Ivy League prospect, but because the Ivy League camps have all of the high end D3 academic schools there. And when I mean there, I mean the coaches, the head coaches, the assistant coaches of, Swarthmore, Carnegie Mellon, all of
that's
the
so true.
NESCAPs, all of those coaches are there working the camp. And so you'll get split up into, there'll be 10 teams of 10, and, you'll have the Carnegie Mellon coach and the, Williams coach coaching your team, right? That's real exposure, right? And I wanted him to have a sense of the cadence of it all, because I'm a big believer in don't just show up your junior year when it's go time and not have a sense of how these things work, right? But we only did a couple, and my rule with Danny was we're not getting on a plane for it, right? Like we'll drive within a couple of hours. Luckily, we're somewhere where that's a lot of options. And we could tell, we did a couple camps. Dartmouth camp was amazing. There was one other Ivy League camp that was a pure money grab. And we're like, well, we don't need to do that one next year. And he heard from a bunch of D3 schools from that. And that was a terrific process. Now, some of those were come to our camp, come to this, come to that. And again, that's why if you start early enough and you instill in your kid, you have to go build this relationship, because you need to come to me in 12, 14, 16 months time and say, I've been talking to this coach for a year. I trust that this is the right opportunity.
Another thing that's really important is, and I saw this a little bit with Joy, because as talented as she was, I noticed she was not the kid that sort of eat, slept, and drank basketball. Like, we got the really nice basketball court out there in the yard and all, and she wouldn't go out there that often. And that was a source of contention with me. I'm like, I'm spending a lot of money.
Yes.
I need you to get out there more. And I saw some other kids that she played with, the ones that really went on to play. Like I said, 7 of her teammates played, D1 and the rest D2, really. She's one of only 2 or 3 that didn't end up playing. I just could tell that they loved it more. And the reason why that's really important is you're going to be doing this a lot at the next college level, and especially the higher you go up. And if you don't really enjoy it, then it can really ruin your college experience. It can just feel like it's like the equivalent of like a job that you don't like that's taking up a lot of your time. And I saw that for some of her, some of her former teammates that went on. It's like, I'm looking forward to this being over. I'm getting my scholarships, Now, in fairness, one of her best friends, she went and played at College of Charleston. She obviously got the full ride, and then she used the COVID year to get a master's, and was an engineering major, and came out making more money than most families make. I'm not going to say how much, because people might be able to go back and figure this out, who it is. But she's making a ton of money at the job she actually likes, totally debt-free. And she did not like a lot of that, but she sure leveraged it.
Well, know the purpose, right? What's the mission here, right?
Yeah.
And if, some folks listening here are not worried about the affordability side of it, right? So they want to make sure their kid gets into, the school of their dreams, hopefully the kid's school of his or her dreams, right? In terms of, whatever it might be. But yes, like, look, if you can have a full scholarship and leverage it into a master's and, go out into the workforce and, make 6 figures right out of the chute as a 23-year-old kid, that's a great result. But for so many kids that we see, like you, we keep in touch with a lot of families that have sent kids to some really amazing places. I mean, Katie would go to workouts with Aaliyah Boston, who's the South Carolina star, and with kids that are now playing at UConn. And so she knew she was not at that level. And so it kind of made the process easier for us. But in terms of having that perspective and knowing what you want to get out of it, if you can craft that plan and keep it all consistent, then it's going to be a great result for you.
The other thing you have to be careful with it. Now, I learned this early. Joy started in third grade, actually, when we were in Pennsylvania. She played on a fifth grade team in the third grade. And her coach told her back then, her coach had played at William and Mary. But she had two daughters on the team. And she said, I'm going to have a serious conversation with my kids before I'll support them playing Division I. And the reason for that was she had 4 very serious injuries at William and Mary and was forced to have to get out there when she said, you know what, I'm really fortunate that I can walk right now, because the mindset was, you're on scholarship, suck it up and get out there. And so, now look, I don't want to take a broad stroke of the brush and, paint all schools, but, that's a pretty high-end academic school.
Yes.
But yet, hey, it's a business, and people need to really understand the higher you go up that ladder, the more of a business it is. And the coach, I mean, if you're talking about Division I women's basketball at the higher level, these coaches are getting paid a lot.
And we have a lot of Katie's friends that are playing really high end D1. I won't say the schools, but some of these kids, they're told, "Oh, you want to be a dentist? What's your major?" No, that's not for you. You're on D1 scholarship here. You can't do that. You need to take that lab. You want to be a chem? Yeah, that's not available, right? Like, you can't do that while you're on this team. Like, your number one priority is the basketball team. So Katie, I said, had her injury in her last game of her senior year. So her timeline was, all of the AAU big tournaments are in July, and it's a little fuzzy. It feels like forever ago now, but we heard from a bunch of schools. She had gone through the pre-reads right in the summer, right around the end of July, because she'd already taken the SAT and then taken it, twice. And got her super score to be above the average of most of these schools that she was looking at, because it's competitive, right? And to your point, you still got to hit these numbers, right? And the one thing I always say to parents, Mark, and to really highlight it, is these schools are, if you're looking at those uber competitive schools, they reject more kids with the median numbers than they accept.
It's really important to know that.
And I say it over and over to people, and I'm like, can you conceptualize what I'm saying to you? Like, at 7%, 8% admissions, they're rejecting more kids with a 1550 than they're taking it.
Yeah, no, they are. And there's a lot of that. I mean, I said on the podcast a while ago that I had a school say to a kid with almost a 1500 as an athlete. Now, most of the time they want scores, but a school told them apply test optional here, because those scores are weak was the term.
Right.
We're talking about just pushing a 1500, but it was that kind of school, and I think that surprises people.
And so, so for Katie's process, so she was done early. She was committed. She went through ED, and so when she's playing her last game, the following March, she gets the injury. She was devastated, right? Torn ACL, devastated. Thankfully, we were right there courtside when it happened, and we were in the training room with her. And it was, gosh, it's tough to see your kid go through that, right? And so, she's still rehabbing. It's a year-long process, basically, to get back from this if everything goes as well as it can. And so she was really concerned. She had to call her college coach, right? And tell her she had this injury. Well, I don't know what would have happened at a D1 school. I can only tell you that I'm very grateful that Katie is where she is, because that coaching staff was and continues to be so great with her around getting back.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what I see at D1s, and this is something that's not really that well known, is that scholarships are 1-year commitments, not 4. And
yes.
And so what happens is they end up not renewing your scholarship if you're not contributing enough, and that's not advertised. But I saw that happen to several players that Joy played with in high school. They got recruited, and that sometimes, I mean, I have to be a little careful with injury and some things like that, but they find ways to get rid of you. And one of the ways they find a way to get rid of you, I remember this. This is a student. This is going way back now. This is back to my Westtown days. A student that did a PG year, up at Taft School, and that school up in Connecticut.
Yeah.
And then they ended up going. I'm going to actually mention the school because it's so long ago. Nobody would ever be able to know. But they ended up going to, and if they find out, that's okay. They ended up going to Lehigh. But they got a preferred walk-on spot.
Mm-hmm.
So why don't you tell our listeners what that is, Gus? That might be a term people don't know.
A preferred walk-on is basically you're going to be on the team when you get here, but you're not going to be on scholarship.
Correct.
And, Lehigh, a Patriot League school, does offer full football scholarships. And so, you have to ask yourself.
So this was basketball.
Yeah. Okay. So you have to ask yourself, like, by the way, the other thing people don't know is, like, on these football and basketball teams, there's within those ecosystems, there are the travel teams.
Yeah.
Right. And so on a football team, you might have 110 kids on a football team. Right. On a basketball team, you might have 18 or 19 kids on the team, and not everybody's going to travel.
No, yeah, exactly. They got their bench there. So in any way, with this kid, what happened was he got tired of it because he's getting there. He's going there at 5 a.m. He's working out, and he realized he was going to have to be so much better than the scholarship players to play, because he kind of is making the coach look bad if, as a preferred walk-on, you're playing over people that got scholarships. Like, there's some politics there involved in that. And so after doing it for a couple, he's a very academic kid. He was there. He was, like your kids, he was using the athletics as an opportunity to get the best education and further his career. And after a couple of years, he's like, I'm just going to focus on business because I'm not playing a lot. And even when I do really well, I'm kind of like the person in practice that, you do all the hard drills at. So there's some politics there. Yeah, there's some politics there that if you're a preferred walk-on, you got to be better than the scholarship person to play over them because, the coach has some explaining to do if the scholarship kid is sitting the bench. What, did you make a mistake recruiting? So they're going to give that kid every opportunity possible. So what we're trying to talk about, everybody here, is just to know the pitfalls. Like, it can be, and I don't know if we're talking enough about the triumphs, because it can be great when it works. I mean, some people's, best, I ran track in Michigan State only for my freshman year. And I regret that. I wish I would have stayed all 4 years. The coach kept recruiting me throughout the rest of my time there. Come back. I was a walk-on, though. I wasn't a scholarship athlete, but they never recruited for the triple jump. So I was the best triple jumper they had. And I wish that I would have done it more years, because you know what? I have great memories of traveling to all of these different schools and being in the Big Ten championship. And I mean, those are incredible memories. And I wish that I would have done it for all 4 years, actually, looking back on it. So, I mean, it can be a great experience, the bonding with the team, the connections, the networking, the discipline. And then there's all the things that athletics teaches you, right? Like discipline and hard work and teamwork and resilience and grit and losing gracious. I mean, there's so many life lessons.
Even the recruiting process, I think, has added so much value to my kids' life experiences, for all three of them. And Danny kind of, I wish I could have gotten this moment on video to replay. It'll never leave the impression it left on me. But we're talking about recruiting with Danny at the kitchen table, and Katie kind of wanders in, and she's listening, and Danny's maybe scoffing a little bit at some of my best advice around what we should be doing, how we should be doing it. And Katie just kind of looks at him and says, I hate to say it, Danny, but Dad knows kind of what he's talking about. He's already been through this twice with us. So, he's right.
Well, good for you, because that's a hard level to get at with the kids. When that's true for any parent knows that, where they think the parent's right. And kids are different. My oldest daughter, she was like, Dad, you do this professionally. Why would I not listen to you? You think I'm stupid? And then my youngest daughter was like, you don't know everything, So that meant I knew nothing. So she tuned me out.
But it's such a great process for them to have to interact with adults on a different level and strangers at that level. over some really material things. And I was just so impressed at Nick and Katie's ability to be able to manage those relationships as they went through their process. And I think it's going to help them in the world. I think you see so many of those skills transferable to, their professional lives later. And then, you're right, being part of that team, having those experiences and that bonding. And there's something to be said for being on that team and contributing in the way you can. It's not the holy grail that some people project it to be. And there's a lot of pitfalls in it. And, you want to be mindful and honest about, where your kid fits into it, and, trying to get them to go to the next level if they're not into it every day, right? If they're not going to do the work. The one thing we would say to the kids is like, you don't have to do this, and we want you to go tour some schools where you wouldn't play, so that you can have some options away from sports. And we just did the Northeastern visit with Danny the other day.
Yeah.
I said, I'm like, this is a requirement of the process. It's not anything. Like, I just want you to see some schools. Like the D1 coach at Northeastern is not calling him, right? Yeah. That's okay.
Right.
And so, what we want to make sure is that they are sure that they want to do this, because it's a huge commitment. It's a big commitment for them and for us. And then once they get to school, it's an enormous commitment, and they sacrifice all those things, the study abroads, the certain classes, the certain clubs, all of those other experiences. But it can be a tremendous experience in its own right. And look, if your kid's lucky enough to be getting real money off for playing that sport, then that in itself is a financial reward right up front.
Yeah, one of the positives I'd like to share, because I don't want to be too negative here. One of the parents of one of Joy's backcourt teammate from under 6th grade team she was on, he was the dad was had played football at West Point, and he made so this is Gus. You really get to know the parents because you're traveling all around the country, and you're in hotels, and you're sitting in the stadiums with the parents. By the way, don't be that parent who's the jerk that's screaming at the coach all the time and screaming at the ref. Don't be that dude or dudess. That's not good. All you have to try is flipping over and being a referee or a coach for like a week, and you'll see what that feels like on the other side. But anyway, this parent said, everything I feel I've learned in life, I learned from playing football at West Point. And so like there are like life lessons and character lessons and things that can really, really be invaluable. One thing that I feel, shout out to Bruce Price, one of Joy's AAU coaches, instilled all the time in her, and she's to this day, it sticks with her. It says, you don't all come here with the same level of talent, the same height, same size, the same speed, but there are two things that you can completely control, and that's your attitude and your effort. And I need an A+ from you in attitude, and I need an A+ from effort. And that stuck with her, and she applies that to her school, to her other endeavors. And so I really think that athletics can be incredible for character formation. And I think a lot of people would agree with Ben Barnett, who's that person I was referring to, who's actually a pastor in Atlanta. What Ben Barnett said, that like their life lessons can be incredibly rich.
Right. And what a great experience that must have been at West Point, right? On top of the West Point experiences, having that football experience, I can only imagine. The one last item, and
sure.
And Mary, my wife, mentioned this last night. She said, "Don't forget to tell the audience this. So make sure that your kid goes to a school that they would have picked if they weren't going to play sports."
That's really, really important. So we used to say this because the other thing is when I was doing boarding school admissions, I was also the athletic liaison for a few years until another guy came and took over that role. And so when we were recruiting, we used to ask ourselves, we used to say, does this kid pass the broken leg test? Who would know way later my daughter would get the broken leg. But anyway, the broken leg test meant for us, if this person can't play at all, do we want them in the student body?
Yes.
That's what it meant. And that's basically the same thing that you're saying from a student perspective.
Mm-hmm.
If you can't play for whatever reason, like you're like Katie and you get the ACL and now you're out for a year, is it a school that you would select? That's really important.
Right.
So do you think we've covered all the things, Gus? Is there anything else that you haven't covered that you want to share?
I'm glad we talked a bit about, what it can offer you. And my kids have met some really tremendous people through this process. But it's important as a parent to keep your guard up and to make sure you've got an eye on the process and you're protecting them and that you're having good conversations with your kid about the process, about the opportunity set. What we tell our kids is, look, if you tell us you're working as hard as you can and doing all the right things and we don't agree, we're definitely going to let you know. And we're going to have some real specific thoughts around some of that.
You can't want it more for them than they want it for themselves.
Absolutely. And what we don't do for them is we don't have the email address where we're replying, right? Like if you don't want to reply, then it's not going to work out for you. And that's okay. Like if what we also don't do is we don't wake them up for their 6 a.m. workouts, right? Like if you're not out and where you're supposed to be, that's kind of your problem. Yeah. Right. And so, we've been fortunate that all three of them have been fully engaged in it and were doing what they were supposed to be doing, at all time, at each of the turns, I guess. But they've got to want it. They've got to do the work and there's a lot around it that's more than just showing up for the games. That's the smallest percentage of time that you spend on this.
Yeah, and I like to close with two thoughts. And so a lot of times when student athletes come to me, and I end up working with about, on average, around six student athletes a year that end up playing college. On average, some years 8, some years 4 or 5, but an average is about 6 that I work with. The two biggest mistakes that I see students make is they don't aim at the right level.
Yes.
Because there are a lot of levels out there. If you really do want to play, like I said, we've just touched on it, but there's D1, D2, D3, NAIA, then there's high, mid, and low within all of that. And some of the lower levels, you don't have to be a phenom to play at the lower levels if this is something you really want to do and you can get the right academic match and social match and financial match. So that's one of the biggest mistakes I make. And the second biggest mistake that I see is that the student was not an initiator. You've got to be the one reaching out to them. There's so many kids out there. The most precious thing any coach has is their time. And so they would love for their time to be spent on people who are very interested in them.
Yes.
And so you've got to reach out, and you cannot wait for this offer to drop out of the sky the way you sort of people sort of proverbially think of getting a scholarship, and that everybody's packing the gym to come see you, and then they're doing all that.
I mean, if you're 6'10" and you can just, the ball goes in every time.
There's exceptions. That's a good point. There are the phenoms that everybody will just come to you. But if you're like the average person that can end up getting a spot, got to be an initiator. And so if you target the right level and you're an initiator, I can't tell you, Gus, how many people have come to me and said, I'm incredible. Well, it's usually the parents I'm talking with at this point, but my kid is incredibly interested in playing sports, but nothing's happening out there. They're not getting any interest. And those are the first two things I look at right away. And I've seen so many kids that ended up playing a college sport that came to me with that because they were shooting at the wrong level. And normally it's Division I. They're going after Division I. And sometimes they're even looking at mid and high one because they don't have a sense of the competition, and they're like going all these camps and they're doing all this and they don't know what's, they can't figure out what's wrong. If a school is really interested in you, you'll see the coaches will be spending time on you. There will be time that they will invest because they know that their time is the most precious thing they have. And so it won't just be, form letters every now and then. I remember one player that, ended up playing Division I that Joy played with, and she was getting basketball. She was getting text every single day from the coaches every day. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden for some schools, it just went completely radioactive silent because they got a commitment from somebody that had higher rank from her. And then it just completely dropped.
Some of these camps and the time you spend on it can be so much time, so much money that if we went to every camp that our kids were invited to, that probably would have paid for a full college tuition. It feels like. And so if a school sends one of the kids an invite to a camp and it's the first communication we've gotten from them, or they've never texted him or her or emailed or had a one-on-one communication that is a real one-on-one communication, we're not going to go to that camp.
Yeah.
Yeah. So absolutely.
No, like I look at Joy. Joy ended up having 5 solid offers, and every one of those coaches were on her.
Yes.
They were even coming to her high school games regularly.
Yes.
That's not that common because they like to recruit from the travel teams where they can go and they can see like a whole bunch of players. But they would be coming to her high school games, or she did go to an ID camp and she blew up at the ID camp. They were all over her. Versus the other ones, is such a difference between the schools that sent form letters versus the ones that were really interested in her. It's like night and day. And so don't, like if someone is serious about you, you will get a lot of communication from them, and it won't just be letters, and the head coach is going to be involved too.
Yes.
It's not just going to always just be a lower level first year assistant. Like you're going to be having some head coach communication.
Right.
So
the one thing I'll add about some of these, these IT camps, if your kid wakes up and they're not feeling great, they got the flu or their hamstring's a little tight, and you put them out there and they run a terrible, 40 time, or they don't hit a shot and they got a million turnovers, that really hurts.
Yeah.
And so if listen to your kid in this process. If they wake up on the day of a camp and your option is to go and not show great, don't go.
Yeah. Well, Gus, this has been great. I think we've covered a lot of issues. Hopefully this has been helpful for parents. We felt like the Trinity conversation was great, and it gave a lot of good pointers. But we also wanted to point out some of the difficulties and the complexities and the disappointments and some of the places where the train can get off the track. I mean, that was a real positive interview about how it can really work well. And I thought I really enjoyed it. I love those guys, and I really appreciated all they brought to the table. But in talking with Gus, it's like, let's let parents know about some of the pitfalls. Like, there's some potholes in the road out here. And it's not all peaches and cream. And so that's what we were trying to do, is bring some balance to the conversation, and hopefully it was helpful. I really appreciate you spending 90 minutes of your time here with us on this, Gus. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Like I said, it's the least I can do for all the knowledge and insights that I've gained from this community in the last few years. So thank you, Mark.
My pleasure. Friends, on Thursday's episode, Susan and I will discuss an article by Brandon Barnett and Rick Clark that appeared in degreechoices.com entitled Student Search, a Point Counterpoint. Now, Lisa and Susan will answer our question from a listener, and they will answer questions sent in from a mom with twins. And she asks if and how a student should communicate their chronic medical condition in their application. We start a brand new interview, and I'm joined by Lisa. So you see, we're mixing up our hosts here and having a little creativity. And it will be with Brian Hodges, the Senior Associate Director of Admissions at the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign. And we're going back to our traditional college spotlights, where I will be discussing my feedback on my visit in December to the California Institute of Technology in Pasadena, California. And I'll be discussing that with Linda Depker. Now, before I let you go, I can't start out 2023 without saying this. It's not where you go, but it's what you do when you get there, and it's what you do when you get out of there. That is what will determine your career trajectory. See you on Thursday, everybody. And that's our show. A big thank you to you, our listeners, for tuning in this week. If you find this podcast helpful, please follow us, and you'll get every single episode as soon as it is released. If you're interested, there are a few ways you can really support our podcast. You can click the share button and send it to your friends and acquaintances. You can help us pay our staff and our expenses by donating on our website. You can write a review for us on Apple or Spotify. I'm the producer of the podcast, but we have a fantastic team of 14. Shout out to our co-host, Dr. Lisa Ruff, Dr. David Williams, Susan Tree, Vince Garcia, and Julia Esquivel, and to our substitute co-host, Sylvia Borgo. Our sensational sound engineer is Nemanja Motvich. Our amazing music is from Victor Allen Weeks. Marketing designs are from Kimberly Blacks. Lily Parikh manages our Instagram. Our image editor is Talha Khan. Joyce Ducker does our website episode updates. And our webmaster is Stelianos Dimitriou. If you want to have a coaching session with Lisa or me, just text me at 404-664-4340. If you have a question you want us to answer, or if you have a recommended resource or article you think we should discuss, just send it to questions@yourcollegeboundkid.com. By the way, check out our website, where you'll find lots of content that is not on any podcast app. Our website is yourcollegeboundkid.com. If you want to learn about other hot admissions topics, follow us on Twitter at YCBK Podcast. We think of you as our listening family, and we look forward to meeting again with you every single Thursday.